I stared at the email Diana had just forwarded to the entire senior team, my hands trembling so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Effective immediately, all of Meredith Chen's client relationships will be transferred to my direct oversight. For continuity of service, Meredith will provide me with her complete client contact database, communication histories, and strategic notes by end of business today. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading for 3 years. Ever since Diana Ashford had brought me into prestige wealth management with promises of partnership and autonomy, the moment she would finally take everything I'd built. But here's what Diana didn't know. What she couldn't possibly know. I'd lived this moment before. 6 months ago, in another timeline, another life, I'd sat in this exact chair, read this exact email, and made the biggest mistake of my existence. I'd complied. I'd handed over every client I'd cultivated over 8 years of 16-hour days and weekend, calls and late-night crisis management. I'd given her the Hendersons, who'd trusted me with their late daughter's trust fund, the Shu family, who'd let me guide them through selling their tech company, Martin Sawyer, who'd been my very first client when I was a terrified 26-year-old with more ambition than sense. I'd given Diana everything, believing her promises that this was just a restructuring, that I'd still manage the relationships, that this was about firm liability protection. Within 2 months, she'd pushed me out entirely, took credit for every successful portfolio I'd built, every relationship I'd nurtured. I'd watched from the outside as she paraded my clients at industry events, as she accepted awards for visionary wealth management, using strategies I'd developed. The stress had killed me. Literally, I'd died at 34 years old, alone in my studio apartment, from a brain aneurysm the autopsy said had been exacerbated by chronic stress and hypertension. My last thought had been a bitter laugh at the irony. I'd spent my career helping others build generational wealth while destroying my own health for a woman who saw me as nothing more than a useful tool. Then I'd woken up, 6 months earlier, the morning of my 34th birthday, in the same studio apartment, with my phone buzzing with birthday messages and my body humming with impossible knowledge of a future that hadn't happened yet. I'd spent the first week convinced I was having a psychotic break, but the knowledge was too specific, too detailed. I knew the Prestige Wealth Management coffee machine would break on Tuesday. It did. I knew the Moreau account would call Wednesday asking about ESG portfolios. They did. I knew Diana would wear her Valentino suit to the Thursday morning meeting and announce the exciting new client management structure. She did. I knew that in 6 months, she would send this email. And this time, I was ready. My phone buzzed. Diana's name flashed across the screen. My office, now. I stood up slowly, catching my reflection in my monitor. I looked the same as I had in that other life. Dark circles under my eyes from too many late nights. A conservative black suit that did nothing for my complexion. Hair pulled back in a tight bun because Diana had once commented that my natural waves looked unprofessional. But I wasn't the same person who died in that sad little apartment. I picked up my phone and a slim leather folder I'd been preparing for exactly this moment. Diana's corner office took up half the 42nd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Seattle. She decorated it to look like old money. Leather chairs, mahogany desk, original artwork that probably cost more than I made in a year. Never mind that Diana herself came from a middle-class family in Spokane and had clawed her way up through aggressive ladder climbing and strategic backstabbing. She didn't look up. When I entered, a power play she'd used on me hundreds of times just kept typing on her laptop, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the keys. "Sit," she said finally. I remained standing. That got her attention. Her eyes flicked up, pale blue and cold. I said, "Sit, Meredith." "I prefer to stand for this conversation." Her jaw tightened, but she leaned back in her chair, making a show of patience. "I assume you got my email?" "I did." "Then you understand what I need from you. I want the full database transferred to me by 5 p.m. today. Complete contact information, every email exchange, every meeting note, every personal detail you've collected about client families, everything." In my previous life, I'd asked why. I'd made the mistake of showing weakness, of letting her see how much this hurt. This time, I just nodded. "Of course. I've actually prepared something for you already." Surprise flickered across her face. quickly masked. She'd been expecting a fight. The Meredith she knew, the one from the timeline where I didn't have 6 months of foreknowledge, had been devastated by this moment. I placed the leather folder on her desk. She opened it, and I watched her face transform from suspicion to satisfaction. Inside was a USB drive and a printed spreadsheet listing every one of my 73 clients, complete with contact information, portfolio sizes, and relationship status. "This is thorough," she said, and I could hear the greed in her voice. 73 clients representing over $2 billion in assets under management. The commission structure at Prestige meant that whoever controlled those relationships controlled serious money. "I've always been thorough," I said. "You know that." "Yes." She closed the folder, possessive fingers curling over the leather. "That's why this transition will be so smooth. The clients trust you, which means they'll trust my guidance when you explain that you'll be moving into a different role." "About that," I said. "I won't be moving into a different role." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "I'm resigning. Effective 2 weeks from today, per my contract." For a moment, Diana just stared at me. Then she laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. "You're bluffing. You have nothing without Prestige. No client relationships. I have them now. No reputation. You've been here your entire career. You're a name on business cards that I paid to print." "Perhaps," I said calmly. "But my contract is clear. 2 weeks' notice for resignation, and I'm providing it now. My formal letter will be on your desk within the hour." She stood up abruptly, slamming her hands on the desk. "You ungrateful little bitch. I made you. I brought you into this firm when you were nobody. I gave you opportunities. You gave me 60-hour work weeks and a salary 20% below market rate." I interrupted, my voice level. "You gave me credit for your mistakes and blame when I succeeded. You gave me exactly what you thought you could get away with." "Get out!" she hissed. "Get out of my office. And don't think about contacting any of those clients. They're mine now. You signed a non-compete and an NDA. If you so much as breathe in their direction, I will bury you in legal fees." I smiled. In my previous life, those threats had terrified me. I'd believed her when she said she had the power to destroy my career. But I'd spent 6 months learning something important. Diana's power had always been mostly smoke and mirrors. The non-compete was narrowly written and only lasted 6 months. The NDA covered Prestige's proprietary strategies, not my personal relationships. And most importantly, in my previous life, when I'd finally scraped together enough money to have a lawyer review my contract 2 months after being pushed out, he'd laughed and told me the non-compete wouldn't hold up in Washington State Court. I'd been too broken by then to do anything with that information. Not this time. "Have a good day, Diana," I said, and walked out. The next 2 weeks were theater. I came in every day, sat at my desk, and played the role of the defeated employee working out her notice. I didn't contact clients. I didn't need to. I'd already done that groundwork over the previous 6 months. See, here's what I'd learned about my clients in my first life. They'd stayed with Diana for about 3 months before the cracks started to show. She didn't know their kids' names, didn't remember that Mrs. Henderson hated tech stocks because of what happened with her daughter's boyfriend's startup, didn't understand that the XUs needed quarterly face-to-face meetings because Mr. Aju's English was limited, and he felt embarrassed about it over the phone. Diana saw portfolios and commissions. I'd seen people. So in this second life, starting 6 months before her takeover, I'd made sure to deepen every single relationship. I'd started a monthly market. Newsletter with personal insights, nothing that violated my NDA, just thoughtful analysis with a voice. My voice. I'd made sure every client had my personal cell number, not just my office line. I'd been more present than ever at their family events, their charity galas, their children's graduations, and I'd let them get to know me, really know me, in a way I'd been too cautious to do before. I'd shared my immigrant parents' story, my scholarship to UCLA, my first disastrous investment that taught me humility. I'd stopped being just their advisor and become someone they actually cared about. I'd also done something else. I'd quietly started my own firm. Chen Wealth Partners, LLC was registered 4 months ago. I'd leased a small office in Belltown, nothing fancy. I'd hired exactly one person, my younger cousin Marcus, who'd just finished his MBA and was working at a soul-crushing corporate job he hated. I'd brought on a compliance consultant to make sure every document was airtight. I'd set up the technology infrastructure, the custodial relationships, the professional liability insurance, and I'd waited. On my last day at Prestige, Diana didn't even say goodbye. She was too busy, I heard through the office gossip chain, preparing for a big meeting with the Hendersons, my former biggest client and the account she was most excited to personally manage. I packed my desk into a single box. There wasn't much I wanted to keep, and walked out at exactly 5 p.m. The real work would start tomorrow. The Hendersons were first. I didn't call them. That would have violated the non-compete, which prohibited me from directly soliciting Prestige clients for 6 months. Instead, I sent a personal card to their home address. Public information, nothing proprietary about it. Dear Robert and Linda, I wrote by hand. This is a personal note to let you know that I've left Prestige Wealth Management to start my own practice. While I cannot solicit your business during my non-compete period, I wanted you to know that if you ever need anything, whether that's a second opinion, a referral to another advisor, or just someone to talk to about your financial concerns, I'm here. You've been more than clients to me over these 8 years. You've been friends. My personal number remains the same. With gratitude and respect, Meredith. I sent similar cards to all 73 clients, personal, warm, explicitly not asking for their business, just opening a door. The Hendersons called me 3 days later. Meredith, Linda's voice was tight with stress. We need to talk to you. Can you meet us? Somewhere private? Of course, when works for you. Today? This morning? I'm sorry, I know that's sudden, but I'll make it work, I said. How about the Starbucks on Pine Street in an hour? Linda was already there when I arrived, sitting in the corner booth, Robert beside her. They both looked exhausted. Thank you for coming, Linda said, as I slid into the seat across from them. I know you're not supposed to be talking to us about business. You called me, I said gently. I'm allowed to meet with friends. What's going on? Robert ran a hand through his graying hair. That woman, Diana. She's a nightmare, Meredith. An absolute nightmare. The story poured out. Diana had shown up to their meeting with a generic presentation clearly pulled from a template. She'd gotten their daughter's name wrong, called her Jessica instead of Jennifer, even though Jennifer had been dead for 3 years, and Linda had corrected her twice. She'd proposed moving a significant portion of their portfolio into aggressive growth stocks, the exact opposite of the conservative strategy we'd carefully developed to preserve Jennifer's legacy for her younger sister's children. She doesn't listen, Linda said, and I could see tears in her eyes. We tried to tell her about our goals, about Jennifer, about why we needed this money to be safe, and she kept talking over us, telling us we were being too emotional, that we needed to think about optimal returns. I felt a familiar anger building in my chest. This was exactly what had happened in my previous life, but hearing it again didn't make it any less infuriating. But the worst part, Robert said, leaning forward, is that she claimed all the strategies you'd built for us were her ideas. She kept saying, when I set up your portfolio and my approach to your investments, like you never existed. I'm sorry, I said quietly. That must have been very hurtful. We want to work with you, Linda said bluntly. Not her, not Prestige, you. Can we do that? I pulled out a folder I'd brought with me. Not immediately. I have a non-compete clause that prevents me from working with Prestige clients for 6 months. But here's what you can do. I slid a document across the table. This is a form to terminate your relationship with Prestige. You're not required to stay with them. They're not the only game in town. You could transfer your assets to any number of firms. But we want to transfer them to you, Robert said. And in 5.5 months, you can. In the meantime, you could keep your assets in a self-directed account at Fidelity. I can't give you advice during the non-compete period, but I can give you education. I pulled out another document. This is a general market overview I'm publishing monthly. It's available to the public completely free. Anyone can subscribe. It just happens to include the kind of conservative, values-based investment philosophy that I know aligns with your goals." Linda's eyes were sharp. "You've thought this through." "I have," I said. "I'm not going to lie to you. The next 6 months will be inconvenient. But if you're willing to wait, I promise you that Chen Wealth Partners will give you the same dedicated service you had before. Better, actually, because I won't have anyone above me forcing me to prioritize the firm's bottom line over your needs." They looked at each other, one of those wordless married communications that spoke volumes. "We'll wait," Robert said. "And Meredith, we're going to talk to some people, the Cortlands, the Shoes, a few others, people you've helped over the years, because Diana made a mistake today." "What's that?" "She told us we were being foolish for being so attached to you, that advisors were interchangeable, that what mattered was the firm's reputation and resources." Linda's smile was fierce. "She doesn't understand. Money is deeply personal. Trust is personal. And we trust you." The exodus started slowly, then picked up speed like an avalanche. The Cortlands called me the next week. Then the Hughes. Then Martin Sawyer, my very first client, who told me in his gruff way that he'd only stayed at Prestige because of me, and he'd be damned if some ladder-climbing shark was going to manage his retirement fund. Each conversation was the same. Diana had been dismissive, impersonal, sometimes openly contemptuous of their concerns. She'd treated them like numbers on a spreadsheet, because that's what they were to her. And each conversation ended the same way. They'd wait out my non-compete, and then they'd move their assets to Chen Wealth Partners. I watched from a distance as Diana's world began to crack. She'd been so confident after I left. I heard through former colleagues that she'd strutted around the office, bragging about how easy the transition had been, how the clients barely noticed I was gone. She'd given herself a raise based on the new accounts she'd acquired. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks after I left, when the Hendersons formally terminated their relationship with Prestige. Diana called me, violating her own professional standards. "What did you say to them?" she demanded without preamble. "Hello, Diana. I'm well, thank you for asking." "Cut the shit, Meredith. The Hendersons just pulled $15 million from us. I know you got to them." "They called me," I said calmly. "I met them for coffee, as friends. I didn't solicit their business. That would violate my non-compete. If they chose to leave Prestige, that was their decision." "You manipulated them?" "I listened to them," I interrupted. "Something you apparently didn't do. And before you threaten me with lawyers, you should know that I've had my contract reviewed by 3 different employment attorneys. My non-compete prevents me from soliciting clients and from providing financial advice for 6 months. It doesn't prevent me from having personal relationships with people I've known for years. It doesn't prevent them from choosing to leave your firm. And it doesn't prevent me from accepting their business once the non-compete expires." She was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice dripping with venom, "You think you're so smart. You think you've won something. But you have no idea what you're up against. I will destroy you, Meredith. I will make sure every firm in this city knows you're a snake who poaches clients. I will." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but this time it was from satisfaction, not fear. The trickle became a flood. By week 6, 20 clients had terminated their relationships with Prestige. By week 8, it was 35. Diana was hemorrhaging assets under management at a catastrophic rate. I knew from my previous life that Prestige's partnership agreement had specific provisions about client retention. Any partner who lost more than 30% of their client base in a quarter was subject to review and potential removal. Diana had been so confident about the takeover that she'd put it in writing that these were her clients. Now those clients were leaving, and the other partners were starting to ask questions. I heard the gossip through Marcus, who'd maintained friendships with some of the junior advisors at Prestige. There were emergency partner meetings, angry calls from the compliance department asking how Diana had managed the transition so poorly, whispers that she'd misrepresented her relationship with the clients. Meanwhile, Chen Wealth Partners was growing. My office in Belltown had gone from small but adequate to we need more space in 3 months. I'd hired 2 more advisors, both women I'd worked with at previous firms who'd been looking for an opportunity to work somewhere that valued substance over politics. I'd brought on a full-time operations manager, we'd upgraded our technology platform, and every week I sent out my market newsletter. Professional, insightful, warm. A reminder to all those waiting clients that I was here, I was ready, and I was building something worth waiting for. The Shu family sent me a gift basket with a note. 4 more months. The Cortlands sent flowers to my office with a card, counting down the days. Martin Sawyer, in characteristic style, sent me a text. This better be worth the wait, kid. It would be. Diana tried everything. She sent cease and desist letters claiming I was violating my non-compete by sending newsletters. My lawyer responded that the newsletters were publicly available educational content and contained no solicitation. The letters stopped. She tried to badmouth me at industry events. But the wealth management community in Seattle is smaller than people think, and word got around fast about what was happening at Prestige. Other advisors started reaching out to me, quietly, asking if I was hiring. Some of them had their own stories about Diana, about her habit of taking credit and pushing blame. She tried to contact my clients directly, her former clients who were waiting for my non-compete to expire, with special offers and incentives. Lower fees, premium services, personal attention she'd never bothered to provide before. None of them bit. Because here's what Diana never understood. Wealth management at the level I practiced wasn't about fees or features. It was about trust, built over years of showing up, of remembering the details, of treating people like human beings instead of commission sources. You can't rebuild that in a few months with discounts and promises. The turning point came in month 5. I was in my office reviewing a new client proposal when Marcus knocked on my door, his expression strange. "Meredith, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." "Who is it?" "Diana Ashford." I felt my heart rate spike, but I kept my voice calm. "Show her in." Diana looked terrible. Her trademark polished appearance was cracked. Her suit was wrinkled, her makeup was smudged, and there were dark circles under her eyes that even the best concealer couldn't hide. She stood in my doorway, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "You've ruined me," she said finally. I leaned back in my chair. "I've done nothing to you, Diana. I left your firm, as was my right. I started my own practice, as was my right. And when clients chose to follow me, I accepted their business after my non-compete expired, all of which was my right. You manipulated them. You poisoned them against me." "No," I said, and there was steel in my voice. "You did that yourself. You treated them like assets instead of people. You dismissed their concerns, ignored their values, and took credit for work you didn't do. They didn't leave because I manipulated them. They left because you showed them exactly who you are." She sank into the chair across from my desk without being invited. "The partners are forcing me out. They're saying I've damaged the firm's reputation. They're making me sell my equity stake at a discount because of the client attrition crisis I created." I felt no satisfaction in her misery, but no sympathy either. "What do you want from me, Diana?" "I want you to tell them it's not my fault. Tell them you actively poached the clients. Give me something to work with." "Why would I do that?" "Because I made you." Her voice rose, desperate now. "I brought you into Prestige. I gave you opportunities. You owe me." And there it was, the fundamental delusion that had defined our entire relationship. Diana genuinely believed that hiring me, paying me below market rate, working me to exhaustion, and taking credit for my work constituted some kind of benevolent mentorship. "I owe you nothing," I said quietly. "You didn't make me, Diana. You exploited me. There's a difference. Please." The word sounded foreign in her mouth. "Please, Meredith. I'm 48 years old. If I lose my partnership at Prestige, I'll never get another position like this. The industry will blacklist me." "Then you'll understand how I felt when you threatened to bury me in legal fees," I said. "When you told me I was nothing without you. When you made me believe that my value was tied to your approval." She stared at me, and I saw the moment she realized I wasn't going to help her, that the woman she'd spent years controlling and diminishing had become someone she couldn't manipulate. "You've changed," she said. "No," I replied. "I just stopped letting you define who I am." She left without another word. The day my non-compete officially expired, I had 17 client appointments scheduled. The The Hendersons were first at 9 a.m. They arrived with coffee and pastries, treating it like a celebration. "We've been managing our own accounts," Robert said as we settled into my conference room. "Following your newsletters, doing exactly what we would have done with your guidance. But it'll be nice to have you officially back in our corner." "I've missed this," Linda added. "Missed working with someone who actually cares." We spent 2 hours going over their portfolio, their goals, their concerns about their granddaughter's education fund. It felt like coming home. The Ecus came. Next, then the Cortlands, then Martin Sawyer, who shook my hand so hard I thought my fingers might break. "Knew you'd land on your feet, kid," he said. "Never doubted it for a second." By the end of the week, 68 of my original 73 clients had officially transferred their assets to Chen Wealth Partners. The 5 who didn't had left Prestige anyway, moving to other firms or choosing to self-manage. Not a single one had stayed with Diana. The math was brutal. Diana had gone from controlling $2 billion in assets to essentially zero in 6 months. Prestige had forced her out, buying her equity at a massive discount. She'd tried to land at other firms, but the story of the client exodus had spread through the industry. No one wanted to take the risk on someone who'd lost an entire book of business so spectacularly. I heard through the grapevine that she'd ended up at a small firm in Spokane, managing small accounts for unsophisticated investors. A massive step down from her corner office in Seattle. Meanwhile, Chen Wealth Partners was thriving. We'd moved to a larger office space in Capitol Hill, something with natural light and a view of the city. I'd hired 6 more people: advisors, operations staff, a full-time compliance officer. We'd brought on another 50 clients through referrals, people who'd heard about our approach and wanted in. And I'd done something else, something I couldn't have imagined in my previous life. I'd made myself a priority. I worked reasonable hours, I took weekends off, I went to yoga classes and dinner with friends, and actually used my vacation time. I paid myself well, not obscenely, but fairly, with the understanding that my value wasn't measured solely in how much I could sacrifice. I'd even started dating someone, a software engineer named Sarah, who thought my obsession with tax-advantaged investing was charming, and who'd never once tried to diminish my success. 6 months after my non-compete expired, 1 year since I'd walked out of Diana's office for the last time, I was reviewing our annual numbers when Marcus knocked on my door. "Package for you," he said, setting a slim envelope on my desk. "Hand delivered." I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page, printed on expensive letterhead I recognized immediately. It was from Diana. "Meredith," it read. "I've had a year to think about what happened. I've told myself a lot of stories about why things fell apart, about your manipulation, about client disloyalty, about bad luck. But I've come to realize something. I lost those clients because I never actually had them. You did. They were loyal to you, not to Prestige, not to me. I took your work and called it mine, and I believed that was enough. It wasn't. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did to you, and I'm sorry. I hope you're happy with what you've built. From what I hear, it's impressive." "Diana," I read it twice, then set it aside. Was it a genuine apology? Maybe. Did it change anything? Not really. Diana had treated me like a resource to be used and discarded. She'd spent years taking credit for my work, suppressing my growth, and ultimately trying to steal the relationships I'd built through years of genuine care and effort. Her downfall hadn't been my revenge. It had been the natural consequence of her own actions. I'd simply stopped protecting her from those consequences. The real revenge, I realized, wasn't in Diana's professional ruin. It was in this. I was happy. Genuinely, sustainably happy in a way I'd never been at Prestige. I'd built something that was mine. Not because someone gave me permission, but because I'd had the courage to claim my own value. I picked up my phone and texted Sarah. "Dinner tonight? I want to celebrate." "What are we celebrating?" She replied immediately. I looked around my office, at the photos of clients' families on my wall, at the thank you notes pinned to my bulletin board, at the view of Seattle stretched out before me. "Everything," I typed back. "We're celebrating everything." 2 years after leaving Prestige, Chen Wealth Partners managed over $3 billion in assets. We'd been featured in Forbes for our approach to values-based investing. I'd been invited to speak at industry conferences. We'd won awards for client satisfaction and workplace culture. And every single day, I woke up grateful for the impossible gift I'd been given, a second chance. I never told anyone about the rebirth, about dying alone in a studio apartment and waking up 6 months in the past. Who would believe it? And what did it matter? Whether it was magic or madness or some quantum anomaly, the result was the same. I'd taken the knowledge of my failure and turned it into a roadmap for success. But here's what I learned. The rebirth didn't give me anything I didn't already have. The relationships I'd built, the expertise I'd developed, the person I was capable of being, all of that existed in both timelines. The only difference was that in the second timeline, I stopped waiting for permission to claim my own worth. I stopped believing that Diana's approval defined my value. I stopped accepting scraps and calling it opportunity. I stopped being afraid. 3 years after leaving Prestige, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. "Is this Meredith Chen?" A woman's voice, young and uncertain. "Yes, this is she. How can I help you?" "My name is Amanda Wright. I'm a financial advisor at Prestige Wealth Management. Well, I was. I just resigned." I felt a chill of recognition. "Go on." "I heard about what happened with you and Diana Ashford, about how you left and started your own firm and took all your clients with you. I thought it was a cautionary tale, about burning bridges and poaching clients." "But?" I prompted. "But I've been at Prestige for 3 years now, and I'm starting to realize that the story they tell about you isn't the real story. They've got a new senior partner named Marcus Thorpe, and he's doing the same thing Diana did, taking credit for my work, forcing me to hand over my client relationships, threatening me when I push back." My chest tightened. "I'm sorry you're going through that." "I want to know how you did it," Amanda said, her voice stronger now. "How you got out and took your clients with you. How you built something new, because I'm done being used and I need to know it's possible to survive leaving." I smiled. "It's not just possible, Amanda. It's the best decision you'll ever make. Do you have time for coffee?" We met the next day at the same Starbucks where I'd met with the Hendersons 3 years ago. Amanda was 28, brilliant, and scared in the exact way I'd been scared. I spent 2 hours walking her through everything: the non-compete clauses, the relationship building, the careful documentation, the decision to prioritize people over politics. "The truth is," I said as we finished our second round of coffee, "you already have everything you need to succeed. The skills, the relationships, the integrity. The only question is whether you're willing to bet on yourself." "What if I fail?" she asked. "Then you fail," I said, "but you'll fail on your own terms, building something you believe in, rather than succeeding on someone else's terms in a system designed to exploit you." She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, I'm going to do it." "Call me if you need advice," I said, sliding my card across the table. "And Amanda, document everything. Keep copies of your correspondence, know your rights. Don't let them bully you into silence." She left with a determined set to her shoulders that reminded me of myself 3 years ago, so I wondered if somewhere, in some other timeline, there was a version of Amanda who didn't get this advice, who stayed at Prestige and let Marcus Thorpe grind her down until she burned out. I was glad this Amanda wouldn't be that version. 5 years after leaving Prestige, I was invited to give the keynote speech at the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors conference. The ballroom was packed with over 1,000 advisors, all there to hear about building client loyalty in a competitive market. I stood at the podium, looking out at all those faces, and felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost knocked me over. 5 years ago, I began, I was working at a prestigious firm, managing hundreds of millions in assets, and absolutely miserable. I was good at my job, excellent even, but I was convinced that my success depended on staying in the good graces of people who saw me as a tool rather than a person. The room was quiet, attentive. Then something happened that changed my perspective entirely. I paused, choosing my words carefully. I had a moment of absolute clarity where I realized that I was building wealth for everyone except myself. Not just financial wealth, but wealth of time, of relationships, of peace. I was sacrificing everything that mattered to please people who would never value me the way I deserved. I told them about leaving Prestige, about starting Chen Wealth Partners, about the terrifying 6 months of waiting for my non-compete to expire. I told them about the clients who chose to wait for me and why. Here's what I learned, I said. Client loyalty isn't about incentives or contracts or retention bonuses. It's about showing up as a whole, genuine person. It's about remembering that wealth management is deeply personal because money represents people's dreams, their security, their ability to take care of the people they love. When you treat it that way, when you treat them that way, loyalty isn't something you have to manufacture. It's the natural result of authentic relationship. I talked about the importance of boundaries, of fair compensation, of building a practice that sustained you rather than drained you. And then I said something I'd been thinking about for years. Some of you in this room are working for people who take credit for your work, who underpay you, who threaten you when you try to advocate for yourself. Some of you are being told that you're nothing without the firm's name and resources. I want you to know something. That's a lie. The energy in the room shifted. You are the asset. Your relationships, your expertise, your integrity, that's what clients are buying. The firm is just infrastructure. And if the infrastructure is toxic, you can build new infrastructure. It will be hard, it will be scary, but it is absolutely possible. And on the other side of that fear is a career that you actually want to live. The applause started before I'd even finished my closing remarks. Afterward, I was mobbed by advisors wanting to share their stories, ask for advice, tell me that they'd been thinking about leaving their firms but didn't think they could do it. You can, I told each of them, if you're willing to do the work. One woman, probably in her 50s, gripped my hand with tears in her eyes. I've been at my firm for 23 years. My boss has been taking credit for my work for 2 decades. I thought it was too late for me to start over. It's not, I said. Your clients know who you are. Your experience is valuable. And you deserve to spend the last decade of your career building something that honors your contribution. She nodded, fierce determination replacing the tears. I'm doing it. I'm really doing it. I watched her walk away, already pulling out her phone, probably to call a lawyer about reviewing her contract. That's when I felt it. The same sensation I'd had when I woke up in my apartment 5 years ago, the bone-deep knowledge that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not because some cosmic force had given me a second chance, but because I'd taken it. 7 years after leaving Prestige, Diana reached out again. This time it was a request to meet for lunch, sent through LinkedIn with a message that was brief and professional. I'd like to discuss a potential opportunity. Would you be willing to meet? I almost declined. What could Diana possibly have to offer me? What trap was she setting? But curiosity won out. We met at a quiet restaurant in Belltown, neutral territory. Diana arrived exactly on time, looking more like her old self, polished, professional, but with something softer in her expression. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said as we sat down. "I know I don't deserve your time." "What's this about, Diana?" She took a breath. "I'm starting a consulting practice, helping firms improve their retention and client satisfaction. It's inspired by what happened with us, actually. I've spent the last 5 years really examining why I lost those clients, why my career imploded, and I've come to some difficult realizations about my leadership style." I sipped my water, waiting. "I've been working with a therapist," she continued, "about my need for control, my tendency to take credit, my fear of being overshadowed. And I've been reading everything I can about healthy workplace cultures and sustainable client relationships. I've even done some pro bono consulting for smaller firms, helping them avoid the mistakes I made." "That's good," I said carefully. "I'm glad you're doing that work." "I want to know if you'd be willing to be a case study," she said. "Not named, if you prefer, but your story, our story, is a perfect example of what happens when a firm prioritizes ego over relationships. I think it could help a lot of people. Both advisors who are being exploited and managers who don't realize they're creating toxic environments." I studied her face, looking for manipulation, for an angle. But she seemed genuine. "What would this involve?" "An Interview about your experience, your perspective on what went wrong, what you learned, how you built Chen Wealth Partners differently. I'd compensate you for your time, of course. I don't need your money, Diana. I know, she said quietly, but I'd like to give it anyway, as a small acknowledgement of the value you provided that I never properly compensated you for. We talked for another hour. She told me about the firms she'd been consulting with, about the patterns she was seeing, young advisors being exploited, senior partners taking credit, toxic cultures justified as industry standard. I was part of the problem, she said. I perpetuated a system that hurt people, and I want to spend the rest of my career trying to fix that. Before I left, I agreed to the interview. Not because I'd forgiven Diana. Forgiveness felt too simple for what had happened between us, but because I believed in the work she was describing. If my story could help even one advisor avoid what I'd gone through, it was worth revisiting. 10 years after leaving Prestige, Chen Wealth Partners had offices in 3 cities and managed over $8 billion in assets. I'd built the firm I'd dreamed of. Competitive compensation, generous benefits, mentorship programs for young advisors, strict policies against taking credit for others' work. We promoted from within. We valued expertise over politics. We treated our people like the assets they were, and our client satisfaction scores were off the charts. The industry had noticed. We were consistently ranked among the best wealth management firms in the country, not for our size, but for our approach. I'd personally stepped back from day-to-day management, moving into a chairman role that let me focus on strategy and mentorship while younger partners ran operations. I was 44 years old, financially secure, and finally able to enjoy the life I'd built. Sarah and I had gotten married 5 years ago. We had a house in Madison, park with a view of Lake Washington. We traveled, we hosted dinner parties. We lived the kind of balanced, fulfilling life that had seemed impossible when I was grinding myself to dust at Prestige. One evening, I was sitting on our back deck, watching the sunset over the water, when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Prestige Wealth Management declares bankruptcy after series of lawsuits. I clicked through to the article. Apparently, Marcus Thorpe, the partner who'd replaced Diana, had been running the same playbook of exploiting advisors and taking credit for their work. But unlike Diana, he'd also been involved in some questionable investment strategies that bordered on fraud. Several former advisors had filed lawsuits. Clients had fled. The regulatory agencies had gotten involved. The firm that had once been Seattle's premier wealth management company was finished. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no sadness. Prestige was a ghost from a life I'd left behind. Its success or failure had no bearing on who I was now. I was about to close the article when I noticed a quote at the bottom from one of the former advisors who'd filed suit. I stayed silent for too long because I thought I needed the firm's name to be successful. Then I heard Meredith Chen speak at a conference, and I realized I didn't need them. They needed me. That changed everything. Amanda Wright, the young advisor who'd called me 7 years ago. I smiled and texted her. Saw the news. How are you doing? She responded immediately. Better than ever. My own firm is thriving. Thank you for showing me it was possible. Sarah came out to the deck with 2 glasses of wine, handing me one as she settled into the chair next to mine. You look pleased, she observed. Just thinking about how different life is from 10 years ago, I said. She raised her glass. To second chances? I touched my glass to hers, the crystal ringing clear in the evening air. To taking them, I said. The thing about Rebirth is that you can't know for certain if it was real. Maybe I did die and wake up 6 months in the past with the knowledge to change everything. Maybe I had a nervous breakdown and hallucinated the whole thing. And the 6 months of preparation were just me finally getting my act together after years of accepting less than I deserved. Maybe it was a vivid stress dream that felt real enough to shock me into action. In the end, it doesn't matter. What matters is that something, whether supernatural intervention or psychological break or simple desperation, gave me the clarity to see my situation for what it really was. To understand that Diana's power over me was largely illusory, built on my own fear and self-doubt. To recognize that the relationships I'd built, the expertise I'd developed, and the value I provided were mine. Not Prestige's, not Diana's, mine. And that recognition was the real rebirth. Every person who's ever left a toxic job, ended a destructive relationship, or walked away from a situation that was slowly killing them. They've experienced a kind of rebirth, a moment where they stop living the life others expect of them and start living the life they actually want. Most people just do it once. I got to do it twice, in whatever metaphysical sense that means. And the second time, I did it right. 15 years after leaving Prestige, I was invited to give a commencement speech at the University of Washington's Business School. Standing at that podium, looking out at hundreds of graduates about to enter the workforce, I thought about what I wanted to tell them. I could talk about networking, about building client relationships, about the technical skills they'd need to succeed, but that's not what they needed to hear. 15 years ago, I said, I was working at a firm where I was very successful by conventional metrics. I managed hundreds of millions in assets. I had an impressive title. On paper, I had everything I'd worked toward. But I was miserable because success meant nothing if I had to sacrifice my dignity to achieve it. Some of you will graduate and take jobs where you're appreciated, where your contributions are valued, where you're paid fairly and treated well. You're the lucky ones. Others will find yourselves in environments where you're exploited, where your work is taken credit for, where you're told that your value is tied to the firm's name, not your own capabilities, where speaking up means risking your career. If that happens to you, I want you to remember something. You are not trapped. You might feel trapped. The people exploiting you will certainly want you to feel trapped, but your skills, your relationships, your integrity, those are portable. You can take them anywhere. And yes, leaving will be hard. It will be scary. You'll have to build new infrastructure, new credibility, new relationships. People will tell you you're making a mistake. But here's the truth. The only real mistake is staying somewhere that treats you as less than you are. Your worth is not determined by your title or your firm's name. It's determined by the value you provide, the relationships you build, and the integrity you maintain. No one can take that from you unless you let them. So when someone tries to diminish you, to take credit for your work, to convince you that you're nothing without them, remember that they're lying. They're lying because they need you to believe it, because the moment you realize your own value is the moment their power over you disappears. Don't wait for permission to claim what's yours. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until the situation becomes unbearable. The day you realize you deserve better is the day you should start building something better. Thank you and congratulations. The applause was immediate and thunderous. Afterward, as I was leaving the auditorium, a young woman caught up with me. She couldn't have been more than 22, still in her graduation robes. "Ms. Chen," she said breathlessly, "I just wanted to say, I have a job offer from a big consulting firm, amazing salary, prestigious name, but I've heard stories about their culture, about how they burn people out. And I've been trying to convince myself to take it anyway because it looks so good on a resume." She paused, meeting my eyes. "But you're right. I don't have to." "No," I said. "You don't. There's a smaller firm that's offering less money but better work-life balance, and they seem to actually care about developing their people. I'm going to accept their offer instead." I smiled. "That sounds like wisdom." "It sounds like fear," she admitted. "What if I'm making a mistake? What if the big firm was my only shot at success?" "Then you'll build another shot," I said. "That's the secret they don't tell you. You get more than one chance at success. And the chances you build for yourself are usually better than the ones you're handed." She nodded slowly, then surprised me by pulling me into a hug. "Thank you for showing us it's possible." I watched her walk away, back toward her family, her whole life ahead of her, and I thought about all the versions of ourselves we could be, in all the different timelines of all the different choices. Somewhere, there was a Meredith Chen who never left Prestige, who died alone and stressed and unfulfilled, her potential unrealized, her value unclaimed. But in this timeline, I was alive. I was free. I'd built something meaningful, and I'd helped others do the same. That, more than any amount of assets under management or industry awards, felt like success. 20 years after leaving Prestige, or one life and 20 years, depending on how you counted, I decided to retire, Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because I'd built Chen Wealth Partners to be bigger than any one person, and the next generation of leaders was ready to take the helm. My last day was nothing like my last day at Prestige. Instead of slinking out with a single box and no goodbye, I was fated with a party that took over the entire office. Clients came, employees came, even competitors came to wish me well. The Hendersons, now in their late 80s, made the trip from their retirement community in Arizona. "You changed our lives," Linda said, gripping my hands. "Not just financially. You showed us that people still mattered in business. That was a gift." The Sioux gave me a jade pendant that had been in their family for 3 generations. "For luck in your new chapter," Mrs. Zhu said. "Though you make your own luck, we think." Martin Sawyer, now 92 and still sharp as ever, cornered me by the refreshments table. "You did good, kid. Built something that mattered. That's more than most people can say." "I learned from the best," I said. He snorted. "You learned from your mistakes. That's better than learning from the best." As the party wound down and people started to leave, I found myself standing in my office, my former office, looking at the photos and memories accumulated over 2 decades. There was a picture of me and my team after we'd won our first industry award, a thank you note from a client whose daughter's education I'd helped fund, a framed article from Forbes about the advisor who put people first, a photo from my wedding, Sarah laughing as I tried to cut the cake, evidence of a life well lived. Marcus knocked on the doorframe. He was 42 now, married with 2 kids, and running operations with the same dedication he'd shown since I first brought him on. "Everyone's gone," he said. "I'm locking up. You ready?" "Almost," I said. "Give me a minute?" He nodded and left me alone. I sat at my desk one last time and pulled out a piece of paper and a pen. "Dear Diana," I wrote, "I heard you're doing well with your consulting practice. I wanted you to know that I hope you continue to find meaning in that work. What happened between us was difficult, but it taught me something important, that even our worst experiences can become the foundation for something better. You pushed me to discover my own strength, even if that wasn't your intention. For that, I'm grateful. I wish you well. Meredith." I'd never send it. Diana and I had exchanged our necessary words years ago, but writing it felt like closing a circle, releasing the last little bit of anger I'd been holding on to. I folded the letter and slipped it into the shredder. Then I turned off the lights and walked out of Chen Wealth Partners for the last time as its leader. Sarah was waiting in the lobby, leaning against the reception desk with a smile. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Like freedom," I said. "So what do we do now?" I thought about all the things I dreamed of doing when I had time. Traveling without checking email every 5 minutes, learning to paint, volunteering with young advisors, writing a book about ethical wealth management, sleeping past 6 a.m. "Everything," I said. "We do everything." We walked out of the building hand in hand into the Seattle evening, into whatever came next. Behind me, Chen Wealth Partners would continue to thrive. The clients would be cared for, the employees would be valued, the work would continue, but it would continue without me carrying it on my shoulders. For the first time in either of my lives, I belonged entirely to myself. And that, more than any client list, more than any revenge, more than any professional triumph, that was the real victory. I'd stopped waiting for permission to claim my worth. I'd stopped letting others define my value. I'd stopped believing that my success required me to sacrifice my well-being. And in doing so, I'd discovered something that the old Meredith, the one who died alone and stressed and unfulfilled, had never known. That the sweetest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building a life so full and rich and meaningful that they become irrelevant. Diana had tried to take everything from me. Instead, she'd given me the push I needed to take everything for my youth. And I'd never have to thank her for it.